The Year to Their podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Year to Their, it's time to start the fun.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Ear to Their podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I am your host, Phil Gramlich, and each and every week I will bring you a different Walt Disney World word and then give you background, hints, tricks, tips, history about that word. All right, let's get right into it. This week's word of the week is brought to you by the letter N. N for Nautilus. So this week I want to talk all about the former submarine attraction that used to be in Disney's Magic Kingdom that everyone remembers fondly, that was called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But before we talk about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, we have to talk about where it all started, and of course, that takes us back to Disneyland. Opening in 1959 was the original underwater attraction, the Submarine Voyage, out in Disneyland, and that was actually that park's very first e-ticket attraction. Now, the Disneyland version operated until 1998, when it was closed, and it was rumored that it would reopen by 2003 as a new attraction. It didn't actually open in 2003. It didn't open up until 2007 as Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage. And that is what is still operating out in Disneyland today. With the original version of this attraction being so popular out in Disneyland, it was decided to bring the attraction east to Walt Disney World. Of course, the Imagineers didn't simply want a carbon copy of Submarine Voyage, so they decided to give it the look and feel of the 1954 Disney film, of course titled 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Disney legend Harper Goff had actually designed the Nautilus for the film, and that design was later turned into a theme park vehicle by Disney Imagineer George McGinnis. These Nautilus vehicles were actually built off-site in Clearwater and then Tampa, and Disney legend Bob Gurr, another legendary Imagineer, was in charge of the construction. So once these vehicles were complete, each Nautilus weighed about 40 tons. And Disney had them put onto the backs of flatbed trucks and driven up to Lake Buena Vista, where they were installed in Walt Disney World in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction. There are some really super famous pictures of those Nautilus vehicles on the back of trucks going through little towns and little cities. And I can't imagine sitting having my coffee in some little coffee shop in the 70s. And here comes, a 40-ton submarine coming down Main Street. But they did, in fact, get moved that way. So the Nautilus submarines were installed in the attraction. And actually, they weren't really submarines at all. They were actually boats that were on a track, and the guests would actually sit below the waterline and look out into the attraction. Each guest would have their own little fold-down seat that they would sit on and their own personal porthole that they would look out of, so they could catch all the underwater action of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Now, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, just like Haunted Mansion, had a narrator throughout the attraction. During your voyage, Captain Nemo would talk to you through a little speaker that was over your porthole. The voice of Captain Nemo on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was voice actor Pete Renaday, who actually did a great James Mason impression for his Captain Nemo character. Now, if the name Pete Renaday sounds familiar, that's probably because he voiced a lot of different characters over the years. He is still the voice of Henry the Bear and Max in Country Bear Jamboree. He played Abraham Lincoln in the Hall of Presidents up until 2008. And he also lends his voice to the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, the old Adventures Through Inner Space, and Disneyland's version of the Mark Twain Riverboat. So the attraction 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was very, very successful, very, very popular, and was obviously a guest favorite in the Magic Kingdom. The problem was it was very, very expensive to maintain. It was enormous. I mean, it took up a ton of room in the park, and it suffered from a very slow load and unload time, so there wasn't a lot of capacity or a lot of guests that could be moved through the attraction per hour. These factors contributed to the attraction being closed on September 5th, 1994, without any prior notice. And it was believed for a long time that it was just down for rehab or for maintenance, and it would be back up within the next year or two. But unfortunately, by 1996, the announcement was made that 20,000 Leagues was closed for good. So then what happened to the Nautiluses, right? Nautili, Nautilo. What happened to the Nautilus submarines? Well, they bounced around backstage in Walt Disney World for several years. They were on the back lot at Hollywood Studios. They were moved all over the place. A couple of them were actually sunk, I think it's sunk, at Castaway Cay to become man-made reefs for the fish. The rest of them, unfortunately, very unfortunately, were taken to a landfill in 2004 and buried. I had actually heard that the burial in the landfill was a myth or a rumor and it wasn't true, but that story was in fact confirmed by Lee Cockrell on episode 35 of this podcast. He actually took some guests who were very upset about the closure of the attraction to the landfill before those submarines were buried. So I have it on very good authority from the man himself that those Nautilus submarines were buried in the landfill. So for a number of years after the attraction was closed, that lagoon stayed in the Magic Kingdom. It was actually converted to Ariel's Grotto until 2004. And then in 2004, the lagoon was drained. All of the set pieces and the rest of the attraction were demolished. The concrete was poured and it became Pooh's Playful Spot from 2005 until 2010. Then the tree from Pooh's Playful Spot, man, that's hard to say, was moved across the pathway at Magic Kingdom to its current location in front of the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And pretty cool little fact, if you go into the tree, you will still see the carving of the Nautilus submarine inside that tree. Of course, now on the spot of the former 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is the roller coaster Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. Now listen, I don't want this episode of the Word of the Week to end on kind of a bummer or a down note, right? So I am inviting you to come with me as we take a virtual ride on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Let's start off by taking a little walk through the queue.
If man is to reap the bounty of the deep, he must learn all he can about the ocean and its contents. To this end, our marine laboratories in Vulcania are stepping up their research capabilities. The sophisticated diving methods and saturation diving techniques of the Nautilus have dramatically increased the time man can live comfortably and for long periods in the ocean depths. It seems safe to assume that one day, future generations will be released from their terrestrial bonds and achieve absolute freedom in liquid space. We hope that this voyage you're about to take, 20,000 leagues under the sea, will stimulate your interest in the phenomenon of life in the ocean depths.
After boarding our Nautilus, we walk down a little narrow row, find our seat, fold it down, and we peer out that little porthole, and we're immediately in the story of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Stand by, Eagle. All station command, sir. Ship break, we're getting underway. Go ahead. On sir. All head one third. Aye, aye. Stand by to dive. Diving station. Dive. Down, you can see. Aye, aye. Trim bow diving planes. 3 degrees down. Catch her at 10 fathoms. Aye, aye. Here she goes.
This is Captain Nemo speaking. Welcome aboard the Nautilus. We are proceeding on a course that will take us on a voyage 20,000 leagues under the sea. En route, we will pass beneath the polar ice cap, and then probe depths seldom seen by man. So make yourselves comfortable, but please remain seated at all times. Here among the reefs, you will see many familiar inhabitants of the undersea world.
And we do. We see the giant green sea turtles. We see the groupers. We see giant sea bass. We see a giant clam and other crazy kind of creatures of the deep. Then we pass by some divers who are cultivating kelp, and then we're told by Mr. Baxter, who's the second in command, that there's a surface storm coming through, and that we in the Nautilus have to dive a little deeper. By the way, a fun little subplot to this is that Mr. Baxter may be a reference to Disney Imagineer Tony Baxter. So Captain Nemo gives the order to dive down a little deeper. The bubbles and everything come in front of our screens, and he takes over again on the narration.
The Nautilus can dive safely below the violence of ocean storms. Surface vessels are not so fortunate. Witness the evidence of their fate. The graveyard of lost ships. For ages, these rotting hulls have kept their secret treasures, safeguarded by silent sentinels of the deep. Man-eating sharks, nature's most unpredictable predators of the sea.
We then reach the polar ice caps. We get to the North Pole and experience the Aurora Borealis. And then we dive even deeper and take it pretty much to the limit where human beings cannot survive anymore. So we ascend a little bit where Captain Nemo starts telling us about the lost city of Atlantis and the stories of the mythical creatures, sea serpents, and mermaids.
Unusual formation to port and starboard, sir.
These crumbling heaps of stone betray the hand of man. I believe we've made a startling discovery. These classic ruins could very well be the legendary lost continent of Atlantis. Some scholars theorize that a remarkable civilization was destroyed by a tremendous volcano. Others treat any concept of Atlantis as pure fantasy, along with legends of sea serpents and mermaids.
Beg your pardon, sir, but did you say sea serpents are mere fantasies?
Belay there, mate. Anyone in his right mind knows there's no such thing as a sea serpent or mermaids. Mr. Baxter, if you think you're seeing mermaids and sea monsters, you've been submerged too long.
And of course, right at that moment, if you look out the porthole, you will see a sea serpent and two mermaids. But of course, Captain Nemo does not even mention them. He just acts like they're not there. So we keep on moving. After that, we in the Nautilus actually come upon the ruins of an ancient civilization. Is it the lost city of Atlantis? Is it something else? We're never really told, because then, just then, our ship is attacked.
Trim the tanks. Captain, don't split days. It's disabled a submarine, sir.
Good Lord! It's one of ours. Its hull has been crushed like an eggshell.
Another monster's attacking forward, sir.
Full repellent charge!
Repellent charge, aye. Maximum voltage.
All ahead! Emergency maneuver. All engines. Stand by to surface. Surface!
Raise voltage, sir.
Proceed on course. All ahead.
All ahead, aye, aye.
Station the maneuvering watch.
Aye, aye, sir. All hands to stations.
Whew! That was a close one. All right, so we got away from the squid successfully. We're gone, and we're on our way back to the dock and Vulcania.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments we will be docking at Vulcania, our home port. It has been a pleasure having you aboard the Nautilus on this memorable voyage that has taken us 20,000 leagues under the sea. Captain to bridge. Reduce speed and proceed to number 4 berth. Stand by to dock.
Bridge, aye, aye. All ahead, 1/3. Stand by the mooring line.
Thank you for sailing with us. And now, when the cabin lights come on, please stand by to disembark. Gather your belongings. Take small children by the hand and watch your step.
And we made it. We are back safely. Thank you so much for taking the time to ride 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with me one last time.
All ashore, please. All ashore.
And that is going to do it for this week's Ear to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. Thank you so much once again for riding along with me. This was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please just tell someone about it. Or, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, or something like that. That would mean the world to me. So thank you again so much for listening. And just remember, there will be a new episode of the Walt Disney World Word of the Week each and every Wednesday morning, as well as a regular episode of the Ear to There podcast each and every Monday morning. So until next time, thanks again. Have a great week. Bye-bye.